What does it mean to be engaged in today's workplace? How do we inspire, inform, and connect a working community? How do we build a culture of irreplaceability, trust, and listening to keep people on board and rowing together? Welcome to Post-COVID Leadership Advice. This series is all about building a workplace culture where people feel heard, supported, informed, and connected. This is a roadmap for leaders at any level, at any organization.
Burn in. What is burn in? Well, we know what burnout is. Burnout is when you're asked to do more than you can actually sustain. And the important thing here is the asked to do part, which means you're given too much to do, you're given too many assignments, your deadlines are too tight, the hours are too long. Burn in is what happens when you are doing this to yourself, either as an individual or as a team. This is what happens when you have a high-functioning team or culture situation, and the expectation is that people log in after dark, that they log in when they're sick, when they're on vacation, when they are doing other things like being at a training, an offsite, at a conference, that they are always on and they're expected to always deliver. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your manager or your leadership is asking you to do these things. It's simply the culture that you absorb when you are in a workplace. Now, how do you know that you or your team is suffering from burn in? This is when the ask is by your coworkers, by your peers. If you're getting assignments in a kind of pepper spray format from your peers, asking for more help, asking for tighter deadlines, reminding constantly that something is due when it's not your actual leadership who is telling you to do this, you could be suffering from burn-in. Have you ever had this happen where you're logging in after dark and you want to clear your plate and have a nice, clean, empty email box for the next morning, and you're sending off emails at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, in the hopes of clearing off your plate, and you get an immediate response. And you have this very funny conversation with your coworker saying, "What are you doing up at this time?" "Well, what are you doing up at this time?" And you're not actually clearing your plate. You're generating more work for your coworker who's trying to do the same thing. And he or she, in turn, is doing the same, responding, putting the ball back in your court. Now, this can lead to an unsustainable situation where the expectation is that you log in at night in order to continue your workday. You're not actually clearing your plate. You're just continuing your workday from before. Now, if your entire team is doing this, then you have an unsustainable situation. People need to log off at the end of the day. They need to switch off. They need to log off during vacations. They need to log off on their sick days. So what we saw during the COVID pandemic is that we had about a 5% increase in productivity. And we saw this blurring of our home and our work lives because we were all working from home. And we got used to this. We started doing this as a matter of business. The expectation is that you would work as before, delivering overnight, sometimes on weekends, and there wasn't a really strong boundary between the work life and the home life. And you would be sending emails, sending messages, receiving texts and assignments, let's say, right round the clock. Now, when we all got back to, let's say, normal, the expectation of being around the clock and working at home and at the office, that continued. So now what? Now we have this situation where we are all continuing to burn ourselves out. And if you ask the average manager, would you want your team to log in at night? Would you want your team to log in when they're ill? Would you want them to log in during their vacations to catch up? The average manager will mostly be shocked and say, no, that's not the intention at all. And yet, how do we explain that everybody is actually doing this? How do we explain all these resignations and the work pressure? Well, burn in is something that managers also have to be aware of. Are your team members giving each other more work than they can handle? And this is something that a team lead does need to be aware of and need to step in. So that's Burn In.
Thank you for being a part of this episode. Subscribe, follow, so you never have to miss another one. These ideas are based on the Comic Books for Executive series. Go to postcovidhandbook.com